O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, will be joining us here at the Indianapolis Scouting Combine. Very quickly, negotiating the convention center, as you learned this morning. Now, I mean, Kevin's been here several times, but when you're Kevin O'Connell, despite being led by the head of David Corus and members of media relations, you still get stopped a bunch of times. And negotiating the convention center, as Nords would remember, you experienced today, and I've done it for almost a decade and a half. It can be a little tricky.
It is. It is. It's so spread out. That's what you see with Indy and a lot of the cities like this. It's just there's so much room everywhere. And this is This is a huge facility, Paul. It goes on for miles and miles and miles. And if you take a left turn at Albuquerque, you can end up, in the middle of nowhere before you know it. So, yeah, it's an amazing place. It really is.
Now, after Kevin O'Connell, we're going to play back an interview that I recorded this morning with former NFL head coach Dave McGinnis and the analyst for the Titans radio network. And when we were at dinner last night and we saw McGinnis, knowing that you never had met him, it caused me to hearken to a story when you and I first met. In 2003, your linebackers coach for the Vikings were at Sun Devil Stadium. We're separated by just glass, just like a window. I could see you, you could see me. It's the end of the game. We didn't know each other at that time. And, you hear me yell, no, the Cardinals knocked the Vikings out of the playoffs. All right, so by the buses after the game, I'll just never forget when we kind of just really met each other and started talking about the game. You're like, that play sucks because we're not going to the playoffs, but then there's also a playoff bonus involved with this thing too.
Right.
Okay, well now we fast forward 20 years and there's the man who coached that team that cost you somewhere between $15,000 and $22,000.
Dave is an amazing guy. He's we never worked together, but we worked with a lot of the same people. Ted Cottrell, he had a lot to do with Buddy Ryan. And obviously the head coach at the Cardinals. So he was a linebacker coach in Chicago with Ditka. I mean, so there's just you have similar experiences with similar people, and for Dave, he's obviously. The first thing he says is, we shouldn't have won that game. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. And then my favorite part, though, is always like you said, and people say, that was that game killed me, or that was a hard one, and it was tough. And I'm like, yeah, I lost $15,000 on that game. I lost a $15,000 playoff bonus, and obviously not making it to the playoffs. You have more insecurity as far as a coach goes. So, but that's the life. That's the life that you live, and that's that's one of the things that we talked about with our jobs now. Is just it's hard on that plane when you're flying home and there's a win because you don't feel like you're as much a part of it. But if you're on the road and you lose, you're glad you're not up front having to watch tape and having to go to the facility right away when you land to try to figure things out. We love what we do. I know he does too.
In this interview we're going to play back, because that 2003 Cardinals team, that was Emmitt Smith's final game.
Yeah.
And he retired as a Cardinal after that. And he tells an Emmitt Smith story that is really, really touching, where Emmitt busted up his clavicle or something during the season, and it's going to end with him on IR. And he's like, Dave, I know I can't play for an extended amount of time. I think he eventually played near the end of the year, but I want to be around to work with this younger team and not just simply be rehabbing something. And Dave acquiesced, and he said, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made, having Emmitt around a lot of these younger guys. That was a cool story.
It was, and you look at Emmitt, and you look at running backs these days, and you talk about where does he fit in the pantheon of running backs. But his ability to stay healthy is just unbelievable. The amount of abuse that man took, and it's funny you bring him up, and another running back, Herschel Walker. I remember playing against him on Thanksgiving Day.
Right.
The day Randy Moss had his 3 picks, and I'm out there blocking him on punt return, and I'm thinking, what the hell are you doing out here? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he is. So,
as Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, joins the 9 to noon radio show at Indianapolis Scouting Combine 2024, and the head coach sits down with us now. KOC.
What's up, guys?
What's going on, my brother? I mean, I got media relations people squeezing my shoulder, a water delivered to you, people from just a bunch of different. I mean, the NFL Combine, it can be so herky-jerky and willy-nilly, just like getting through the convention center. And specifically for you, not, seeing people that you've known for years. Hey, Kevin, they want to chat for 15 minutes. You're like, I got to go. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of that happens, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why if I'm not in our formal interviews at the workouts or spending some quality time with you fine folks, I'm normally in my room.
Right.
Get a great film setup up there and can kind of really work as if I was back in Egan with some of our coaches in town here throughout the week. So we make the most of it. Really got off to a great start with our formals last night. But how about you guys with the prime location, I think?
Awesome.
I don't know if it's good to be by the door or not, but yeah, I can tell you that the respect level for PA in this room, you can feel it. It's palpable.
Come on. It's all based on wins the team has the previous year. Okay? Well, I mean, I could go down that road, too, man.
After 13 in year one, I think we were over there in the corner
because we didn't need any high-end decision makers walking through the door. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So with the Combine and specifically quarterbacks, and I want to ask you about the importance of them throwing here.
Yeah.
It's like, it's I'm not super into these stories or whatever, but since we're at the Combine, you'll read so-and-so and so-and-so are not going to throw at the Combine. You're a former quarterback, and you call plays. So I mean, you know what you're looking for in these individuals. With quarterbacks choosing not to throw here, does that matter much?
You know what? I think I would listen. I would love for all the guys to show up and throw and compete a little bit on the field. That's what this has really been built for, is that on-field workout to pair with the medical evaluations and obviously the formal interview, informal interview process that goes on here. But every prospect, every player is entitled to kind of choose their own path. I mean, every single one of these guys is going to end up throwing either at their pro days in front of every football team or the individual workouts throughout the month, of March and early April. So as far as the public evaluation, maybe the media evaluation of some of these players, it sure does go a long way to have them all throwing on the field. I just know I don't really view it as a negative. I don't think anything negative can come out of throwing. You think of C.J. Stroud last year coming here and putting on a show and really solidifying himself. Anthony Richardson, kind of a lot of the guys over the years that have done it. It normally works out really well because guess what? These guys, not a shocker here, happen to be very talented and can show up and sling it around and put on a show.
But that's not necessarily the case every year with quarterbacks, right?
No.
I mean, they may have a certain degree of talent, but it's I'm just starting to become an early believer when certain people or certain auras jump up. Like before 2020, we were hearing greatest wide receiver draft in the history of the NFL coming. Okay, Vikings get JJ and so on, all the way down to Darnell Mooney and Gabe Davis. I'm like, damn. I mean, they nailed that. I mean, I want to see a couple of seasons, but last year, tight ends we were hearing this time.
Yeah.
Laporta, Kincaid, Musgrave, you had Sims in the offseason. He ended up going active for several games. Well, we're hearing that about offensive tackles and quarterbacks this year.
Yep.
So, I mean, this could be a year like there could be Friday and or Saturday quarterbacks taken. You raise them, you wait a little bit, then they actually might be good, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it seems to be a class that obviously, we've heard a lot about. Those top guys, and rightly so. I mean, their film and their body of work speaks, so highly of who they are as players and their makeup and their ability to uplift teams and everything that goes along with this evaluation process. But, yes, there's always going to be those down-the-line guys that whether it's Friday, Saturday, you may feel at that point in time in the draft that it's the right card to pull because of your faith in their development, your staff to develop a quarterback, and then the players are going to be around walking in the door, at TCO. So totally a great point that you make, and I think it's going to be a draft. It feels, I don't know whether, I've tried to, whether it's the COVID year that allowed guys to get extra time. Yep. It just feels like a deep draft to me. It feels like a,
You mean overall?
Overall.
Yeah.
Just, we're not all the way through the process, but I can tell you just, turning on the tape, a lot of coaches are excited across multiple positions about having some real options to really, enhance our team.
Now, Kevin, you've been here as a player, right?
Yep.
As a position coach.
Oh, yeah.
As a coordinator, and now a head coach. Tell me a little bit about kind of maybe each level and what is it like now to finally be that guy? Because you mentioned and I understand you not wanting to walk around because there's so many people that want to talk to you, and a lot of them they're looking for work. I've been here, as a coach as a position, and as a coach looking for work, right, and all those things. But tell me about now. What is it like now for you, and what did you learn, let's say, as a player going through this, and then as a position and coordinator, of ultimately what makes you a better head coach now because you've been through this process in so many different levels?
I think that's a great point, is having been through it as a player. And the schedule was different back then. It was a little bit more of a grinding schedule. It is a long week for these guys, but as far as when the workouts were and some of the early morning stuff, the late night meetings, it was really built to as almost a stress test.
Yeah.
And I think they've done a nice job kind of pulling that back a little bit, making it a little bit more digestible for the guys to be at their best throughout the entirety of the week. But I do think that helps me, having gone through it, having sat in those formals. A lot of times my role in that formal, I'm really looking for guys that love football, that are tough, that are smart, that really, when they get a chance to start talking about football, they get excited. They start jumping out of their chair, and a lot of times it does take a little bit of an icebreaker. They come in the room, you shake their hands, you give them a smile. Hey, relax, man. This is going to be talking football. You've been doing this your whole life, and a lot of times you can, in that 15 minutes or so, you can hopefully see the best version of that player, at least in that setting, and start to envision what they would look like within your locker room. But I think from the standpoint of being a position coach, for a coordinator running some of the board work, film work, and then obviously as a head coach now sitting beside Kwesi and our coordinators, kind of going through the process. My goal is always the evaluation process for the Minnesota Vikings first and foremost, but I do feel a little bit of a responsibility to try to help these guys go throughout the week, build those relationships, and let them know, regardless of if I end up coaching you guys or not, you've got a supporter in me because I know what you're going through, having gone through it myself.
Well, a quarterback who definitely enjoys talking football is Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
And you're going to have your press conference for the assembled media about 20 minutes from now.
Yep.
And you're going to get hit with Cousins' question or questions. So, I don't know, maybe this can be your combine for that. I'll just lay it out there like that. Fans answer all the time, or ask all the time, about Kirk. And it seems to be such a fluid situation from afar, and I know you like his skill set, but, what are you prepared to face with this press conference with Kirk, and what can you tell us to maybe shed some light on the deal?
Yeah, as far as my feelings on Kirk, they really haven't changed since long before day one on this job. Everybody knows how I feel about Kirk. Love having him as our quarterback, and just thinking back to he's won a lot of football games over 2 years for us, and thinking about where he was at when he did unfortunately get hurt up there after beating the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field, after winning on Monday Night Football against the San Francisco 49ers. I know, in my dialogue, which I've really, had a ton of dialogue with Kirk this offseason, just because I'm going about it like it's just another offseason to build our rapport, build upon what we've been able to do already together. And look, there's going to be negotiations, and that's the whole point of this time of year, and having, Kirk, has a great agent in Mike McCartney, and we've got Rob and Kwesi that do a really good job with that dynamic communication that goes on. And I do play a role, with my dialogue with the players. So ultimately, I think Kirk wants to be a Viking. I think he knows that we want him to be a Viking. And now, through the process that takes place all the way through the, really the first day of the league year, PA, we can really figure out what that's going to look like, and it's going to be an agreement from both sides, and hopefully we can work to get there, and that is my hope.
Do you believe it's fair to lay it out like this, Kevin? The 2024 and maybe 2025 Minnesota Vikings would be at their best offensively with Kirk Cousins at quarterback, but that doesn't preclude them your squad from not taking one anywhere in the draft, and that includes high. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're always evaluating. There's a constant evaluation going on between the short term and the long term and the ramifications of decisions you make. If you're going to take a quarterback in addition to having Kirk on the roster, are you then neglecting another position? And it's
right.
Never a perfect one size fits all type of decision making process with each part of it. But PA, I can tell you that we're going to do whatever we think is best to not only try to win football games in 2024. That's very important to me and what we've built here in the first 2 years, and really wanting to have a better finish than we did last year. We know we can improve our football team. We can coach better. We can give our guys as much clarity going into each and every game as we possibly can. I feel great about having all three coordinators back and being able to build on some of the schemes that we've put in place that I feel very strongly about. But ultimately, those decisions, whether it's free agency and the draft, you're trying to make short-term and long-term decisions and make sure you're doing it in the best interest of not only the here and now, but the future as well. And I think you can do both. But it does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of conversation and dialogue with Kwesi and Rob, and I feel very strongly about that, and clearly the support of ownership as well. Which has always been something that makes this job so special for me with the Wolf family.
Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, for about 5 more minutes from the Indianapolis Scouting Combine. Peter?
What have you learned about motivating people? I mean, what have you... Because that's, again, the big picture when you're the head coach. Meeting these guys where they are, developing them that way, that's a relationship that maybe you had a little bit as a coordinator, but you do now. What's your favorite part of that? What about the mental side of the game, developing these guys? What have you learned about that, and what's your philosophy on that, I think, going forward?
Well, I think there's two sides of it. It's first and foremost, it's my favorite part of being a coach, whether you're a position coach, a coordinator, a head coach. If you're not inherently a leader, teacher, motivator yourself, then you're probably going to be missing some aspect of doing this job at the level.
Because that player-coach relationship, there's nothing like it.
There's nothing like it, and I think that's the beauty of what we've built over the first 2 years. It was very important when we came in here to build our culture and build that foundation. And what that word means, I think it gets thrown a lot. It gets thrown around a lot at those podiums, about 200 feet away from here. But what it really means, it's a living, breathing thing attempting to for the player, by the player, and those guys understanding that everything is being done in the best interest of helping them become the best players that they can become, because collectively, if you put a lot of individual examples of that together on a team, good things are going to happen. And then that's the joy in it. That's why we wake up early, we stay up late, because we're trying to build a football team. We're trying to individually build up our players, develop them, coach them on the grass when we can, get them in the meeting rooms when we can. But it's about the development of people in a lot of ways, and encouraging them to uplift each other, do things for reasons that are bigger than themselves. There's a lot of cliches that get thrown around, but when you live it and you breathe it, and you can see the benefit that comes from that, I think it becomes just so much ingrained in who you are. To me, that's leadership, because it's got to be a 24/7, 365 type thing, and you got to love everything about it, because I just talked about it earlier. I want players that love football. They're tough, they're smart, they're accountable to not only their coaches but their teammates and really themselves.
Makes it a little easier.
What am I saying? I'm saying a lot of things that I look for in myself.
It makes it a little easier for you to go to work and have to make the decisions, do those things, because let's face it, this year you had to reinvent this offense. You had a new leader. I mean, three or four different. You go through 4 different quarters. That's a lot. I mean, that's who you are. It says coach on your shirt. Like Chuck Knox would say, "Don't tell me how rough the waters are. Just bring the ship in." That's no fun. What you did last year was, and you don't have to become a. It's exhausting. It couldn't have. It's no fun at all to have to do that. Right?
Yeah, and I think,
and when you can get a good group of guys, at least you can look at them and in the back of your mind, and you don't have to comment on this, but it's like sometimes you have to coach guys you don't like.
Well, I wouldn't say you don't like, but I would say that you're less comfortable in the moment without the time on task, or really what you've tried to build in a program to adapt on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, or in some cases a short week. it can be difficult. But
That's when it pays off.
What I was really proud of was the adversity that we dealt with and how the fight never stopped. Those guys were battling to the very end. Even in our game, once the playoffs, you're doing a little scoreboard watching. The playoffs. You love to be playing for a chance to go to the playoffs, in Week 17. But once that had been decided, trying to be smart about some of our players, like a Justin Jefferson, and seeing his reaction to not getting a chance to play 60 minutes and finish that thing out, because it's an intent. It's a purposeful action by our guys to be all in for each other every single day. And I think as long as we have that going and brewing in our building, we can continue to build the other parts, Pete. And quite frankly, I'm refreshed and recharged and ready to get back to work with our players as soon as possible.
1 minute, 2 questions. What did you advise running back Ty Chandler to work on this offseason? And what did you learn about Brian Flores and the type of defensive player that he requires? I mean, Metellus, Phillips, Danielle Hunter just had the best defensive seasons of their careers. So, what type of player does Flores need?
Well, I think going in reverse order, I would say Flores needs tough, smart, accountable players that are versatile. I think the versatility of our scheme was on full display, reinventing itself to do whatever we thought was best to win individual football games. And I think we can build on that by acquiring some pieces via free agency in the draft that really give him a full complementary toolbox to go to work with. And then with Ty, absolutely love where Ty finished the year. The big thing for him now, year 2 to year 3, is just that every down consistency, so that he can get those consistent touches, volume touches in a game. But to do that, he's got to be able to do every phase of our offense consistently with no let-up. What does that look like? Catching the football out of the backfield, blitz pickup, understanding the mental game. I call it that mental warfare that's going on between offense and defense. Snap in and snap out, PA. But I love where Ty's at. Going to be a big offseason for him. Really, really excited about Ty.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thank you
very much.
Great seeing you guys.
Yeah, good to see
you too. Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings from the Indianapolis Scouting Combine.
KFAN, The Fan.
All right, Dave McGinnis is former head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, 2000 to 2003, and longtime linebackers coach for some really good Bears teams, 86 to the mid-90s. And Dave is now the analyst for the Tennessee Titans radio network, and we play Tennessee this year. So I thought it'd be cool to not only chat the now with 2024 Titans football with Dave McGinnis, but also down memory lane we go. His final game as a head coach in the National Football League was 2003, Josh McCown, Nathan Poole against the Minnesota Vikings. McGinnis was the head coach for the Arizona Cardinals that day. And we began the conversation with me, who I've gotten to know Dave a little bit over the last year now, saying, down memory lane we go. What do you remember about that day, Coach?
You and I, that was our connection, really, because you were doing that game, I think, as a young broadcaster, right? Was your first or second year doing it. And, and the game itself, that team, we were really struggling, had a lot of people hurt, but, and the momentum had kind of been building. And so I always was very honest with my team and said, look, I don't know whether I'm going to make it as your head coach next year, but let's go out, doing the things that we've all believed in, ever since I've been here. And then, it was pretty incredible because the Vikings were a really good football team. There was 2 receivers on the field from Marshall University. I had Nathan Poole and you guys had a real good one, that's in the Hall of Fame. So anyway, as the game unfolded, we were laying it out there, and I told them all week, if it comes to a point during a ball game, I will make decisions right on the edge as far as to try to put us over the top. And so the way that game unfolded, it was really incredible. And then, of course, with the onside kick, when we got the ball back, and then Josh McCown, I had drafted him in the 3rd round, and it was 4th and about 1 million. And all of a sudden he's running around back there like you do in the backyard playing with your little brother, and fires one up in the corner of the end zone, and Nate Poole right at the corner. And you and I have been in this league long enough to know that it was a force out. Now, in today's football, in the National Football League, that's an incomplete pass. But back then, he had 1 foot in and got pushed out right at the pylon. And so, if you'll remember, we were waiting and waiting and waiting, and the whole place erupted, and it was really, really incredible. And of course, the players were all excited and carried to be off the field. I remember talking to Red McCombs. Red was down on the field, and he was a Texas guy, and I'm a Texas guy, and he just went, "That was some really damn good ball coaching." He said, "That was some damn good ball coaching." He says, "No way you guys should ever beat us." So anyway, but I get in the locker room, and the thing about it is Mike Sherman and Mark Hatley are at Green Bay. And of course, Green Bay and the Vikings were, whoever won that ball game was going to go in, but they had won their ball game, and all of a sudden Minnesota just has to beat the Cardinals, and so they've got it up in Lambeau Field on the big boards, and that erupted. And then so Mike Sherman and Mark Hatley called me in the locker room after the game. "Coach Mac, congratulations. We would love for you to come in for the playoff game." And I said, "Well, I may have a lot of free time here now." I said, "But I probably won't do that." I said, "But how about inviting Nathan Poole and his wife?"
Wait a second. So he got the key to the city and got to go to that game, and you arranged it?
Yes. I said, "How about inviting Nathan Poole and his wife?" And they went, "Great idea. Do you have his number?" I said, Paul Jensen will get you his number. So there you go. He gets the key of the city, and he's waving to the crowd like the Pope, out of the suite, for their playoff game. Oh, it was great. And the other thing about it is that for about 6 months afterwards, of course, I kept that house in Phoenix for a long time. I was getting cheese baskets from all over the state of Wisconsin.
So what was it like having Emmitt Smith in Cardinal red and the final year of his career?
Let me tell you what I did with Emmitt, and that was pretty unusual. There's a really young football team. Of course, that was back then. I mean, it was a different world. Emmitt still wanted to play, when he was, and so when he and his group, they came out, I brought him out to visit. We went up, there was a resort up there in the mountains, out in Scottsdale. And so he and I walked out on the back porch, and I said, "Look, I know this is going to be a big deal marketing wise, because you are who you are." I said, "But here's what I need. I just need help from you to teach these guys how to be professionals." I said, however long you want to do it, that's what I need. All this other stuff that surrounds it, which was a lot, I said, but if you can do that for me," he said, "Coach Mack, I promise you I will do that." And let's fast forward till we go to Dallas to play, and he gets hit on a lead play to the weak side. The safety comes down and fractures his scapula on a lead. And so he's in tremendous pain, tears in his eyes on the sideline, doesn't not want to go in and get an x-ray. And I finally, the trainer said, "You've got to go in." So take it to the end of the ball game. We're in there. They x-ray. I said, "Mac, he's got a crack, he's got a cracked scapula." And so back to Phoenix, I bring him in my office, and I said, "Look, you've done everything I've asked you to do." I said, "I'm going to put you on IR." He said, "Coach, please don't do that." He said, "I promise you I can come back from this." He said, "If I'm on injured reserve, I can't do what you brought me here for. I cannot be able to influence this team, because if you're on injured reserve, then even though you're still with the team, you're separated." He said, "I will come back from this." And he did.
Dave McGinnis, analyst for the Titans Radio Network. Vikings are at Nashville this year, taking on not only the AFC South, but of course the Tennessee Titans. Dave calls games with a Mike Keith, and is the former head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Also coached linebackers for the Chicago Bears for about a decade. You started right after the '85 Bears. Renowned as one of the great defenses in the history of the NFL. You still had, there still were a fair amount of those big name players on that Bears defense in '86 when you started, right?
They were all there. Wow. In fact, and if you'll go back and look in the history books, the statistics for that '86 Bears defense superseded the '85 team. They were all there, and they were all there for quite a while. They were all there about through '88. Then when free agency hit, and of course the world changed, but they were all there. Yeah, Mike Ditka hired me. And there was only 7 coaches on the staff, and I'm very, very young, know nothing about it. And I can remember I went up there and interviewed, for 2 days, and then his secretary came and said, "Coach Mack, Mike Dick would like to talk to you this morning. Is that, I said, sure. I'm figuring he's going to say, look, thanks for coming. We appreciate you being here. This is really good. And I hadn't even walked in the door, and he's sitting there looking at me and says, you want this job, kid? And I go, well, yes, sir. Yes, sir. He said, okay, just remember two things. You're the coach. They're the player. I've always got your back. And he said, I want you to know this. He said, I really believe you're going to have a long career in this league. He said, but let me tell you this. Never forget that every day in this league is an interview. For you, for the players, for me. He said, now go to work. And so, what a hell of a break for me, for Mike Ditka and Vince Tobin to give me that opportunity. And then they dropped me in a room with Singletary and Otis Wilson and Will Marshall and Al Harris and Jim Morrissey and Ron Rivera, and we're pretty good.
That's a heck of a coaching staff there. Now, with the Titans have the 7th overall pick in the first round, and is the assumption from an outsider like me that Will Levis will be the quarterback next year, and there are still things to be decided with Derrick Henry?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Will Levis will be the quarterback. He will be the quarterback. He showed enough, early on last year with what he could do. He'll still have some refinement to do, but the physical skills, the raw talent is there. Derrick Henry is a pretty unique. He fulfilled a complete 5-year contract. And he earned every bit of that money. Now this is really his first time for free agency, and even at 30 years old, he's a remarkable. Look, I've been around in my career. When I first got into the league, Walter Payton was a running back on the team, and then you just mentioned Emmitt Smith. Been around Emmitt Smith, and then Derrick Henry. I was there with CJ2K. When I was coaching, so I've been around some running backs. We had Adrian Peterson. We brought Adrian Peterson in there, and I could be so. But Derrick Henry is different. So if anybody, I really believe Derrick Henry's has years left. So it's going to be interesting to find out. This free agency period, especially now with the extra $30 million being added on the salary cap, this is going to flip a lot of scripts in free agency this year.
Dave, last one. Thanks for the time. Coach Dave McGinnis from the NFL Combine. If you could handpick, or if you had your choice, not necessarily name a player, you're welcome to offer it if you want, but the 7th overall pick for the Titans, like what position player, what would you be thinking?
Well, the Titans need help in the offensive line. The offensive line, particularly at tackle, they need that. And also, they're depleted in the secondary. They need help at corner. And then, going through, I've been through about 200 of these players that are going to be in this draft. There's an abundance of wide receivers, and top-tier wide receivers. So I've drafted players for 31 years. I don't have to draft them anymore, so I'll let somebody else make that decision.
But I can tell by looking at you here in Indianapolis that when you said, hey, I've looked at X amount of players, you still enjoy watching the All-22 and trying to find tells and like things that can be fixed or things that are great when you watch film, right?
Well, I left my notebook over there on the desk before you and I came to do this interview, and I've kept every notebook for the 39 years I've been doing this in this league of players for the draft. So I absolutely love it. But we all know, and your listeners know, it's the lifeblood of the league. It's the lifeblood of the league, and so I can't get enough of it.
Hey, Nords, what a cool cat, man. It's getting a chance to know him a little bit last year when the Titans were in town for the joints. And, remembering Dave McGinnis coached, one of the more memorable games, at least in the last X amount of years of the National Football League. At least that's what a lot of people say. But then you hear, the Texas drawl and the way he lays things out, man. He's a super cool cat. Really happy I ran into him.
No, I thought that was a cool interview. I must admit, though, it took me to jump to Wikipedia. When you sent the interview over, you're like, yeah, I talked to Dave McGinnis this morning. Yeah. And then we try to decide when to play it back. I'm like, okay, first of all, who the hell's Dave McGinnis? Okay, sweet. The 03 head coach of the Cardinals. So that no moment came into play. And then the connection there, he was the Titans linebackers coach for 7 or 8 years after that.
Right.
Because now, 6 degrees of how this league works and how people find their way, their pathway through it and make a career out of it. How long has he been Mike Keith's sideline guy? Because we always, whether it's Keith, there's probably, Mark Vandermeer is probably 6 feet away from you right now. I can't hear Nestor Aparicio, so I know he might not be on site. But you see some of these familiar, friendly faces each year, and it was super cool to finally get a chance to catch up with Dave McGinnis. So what we're going to do is, it looks like we're going to pause and get the audio issue figured out back there in Indianapolis. But final segment around the corner 9 to noon. We'll pick this up. PA, Pete Bursich on location in Indianapolis. It's 9 to noon at the
3 KFAN.
Sorry about that, Bud. What were you saying?
It was cool to hear from Dave McGinnis, and one of my favorite parts about the Combine, and I love that right out of the gates, whether maybe it'll be Stefanski tomorrow and just finding some of those familiar, friendly faces. But as crazy as it is, you were talking about Kevin O'Connell just trying to traverse the mass hysteria that the Combine festivities have become over the time that we've been going there. It's cool to find kind of still that tight-knit community of regulars, so to speak, when you're down there at the Combine.
Yeah, no, it's dynamite, but getting the answer or to the bottom of this quarterback situation, the crumbs are beginning to lay out.
Yeah.
Where it's whether we're talking to Jordan Reed about McCarthy or Penix or quarterbacks like that, and Pete, that's pretty much what it's mostly about is those crumbs, right?
And you get an idea of you find the people that with whom you respect their opinions, and you get their 2 cents. And we've been hearing a lot of consensus as far as, like you said, with this group with the quarterbacks and with the offensive tackles and how deep it is and how that changes the opportunities going into it. When you have that many quarterbacks, this doesn't happen but once every, in a generation maybe.
Right.
That you can be picking at 11 and still get a guy who normally would go 1 or 2 in years past. So that changes everything, and then you have all the free agents and everything. It's fun to try to put the pieces of the puzzle together. We'll never know exactly what they are thinking. We'll never know exactly what any of these teams are thinking. But it is fun to just learn and hear and figure out this draft. And I'm excited for the draft this year.
Yeah,
it's not been my favorite thing. Usually it was every year you sweat the draft to see who they draft someone that's going to replace you as a player. The draft, you hated it, but it's a great chance, I think, this year to add some real talent, because I think there's a lot of it coming out this year.
APA, one thing I was curious about, you guys were actually there on site with him, but the interview and the conversation with Kevin O'Connell and just trying to digest everything that he's going through this week, and as plans change or interviews virtual, how long people are going to be there, et cetera. But specifically on the Kirk Cousins question, I think Kirk wants to be a Viking. He knows we want him to be a Viking, and then hopefully we can work to get there. He's addressing the larger media right now as we speak. But what did you think about that conversation and maybe some of those comments in particular?
Well, excellent question, and I'm glad you asked, because if you hadn't jumped in, I wanted to talk exactly about that. Where, I believe the Minnesota Vikings want to bring Kirk Cousins back.
Yeah.
But I also believe they want to draft a quarterback relatively high.
Right.
And that's kind of been, a plan that we've talked around 9 to noon, specifically Nordo and I. But the closer or the more we chat with people on or off the microphone, I earlier it was said, Kevin and with Alec Lewis, Kevin and Kwesi both have said we want him back. And I'm like, well, they're going to say that, because they're not going to say the alternative. We don't want him back. And there's a way to get around that without, getting right to the 100% truth. But now, after chatting with Kevin and, just being here for a little while, I really believe that they're going to make a big push to get Cousins back, keep the team, specifically offensively, as good as it possibly can be now, while raising somebody else.
And you have that opportunity this year. You don't normally you at 11 could have the possibility of staring at either J.J. McCarthy or Bo Nix, right? Think about that at 11. That's once in a lifetime opportunity. So to that point, you may, this is going to be a unique draft. Yes, they want Kirk Cousins back. But that's not the question. The question is obviously the money. Is it going to be the guarantee? Is it going to be the no trade? Is it going to be all this and that? That's what it's going to come down to, right? It's not a question of whether or not they want Kirk back, whether or not they think he's going to be healthy. It's the question is at what price?
Yeah.
And if they can agree on a price, Cousins will be back. No question about that.
But see, when there's no question they want Kirk back. Yes, I would defer to that. But I am not ruling out two things, and neither one most people are talking about, and I don't have to be the guy that, is contrarian, is bringing up what nobody's talking about, because I half-heartedly believe it. I'm still not ruling out San Francisco making a run at Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, that could happen.
And I know Brock Purdy just played well in the Super Bowl or whatever, but let's not forget, Cousins is the highest end system guy for what Kyle Shanahan wants to do. And he's wanted him for a long time. And now there's an opportunity. And I believe he's wanted him for quite some time. Maybe it's a long shot, but I'm not ruling it out. Secondly, is if the Minnesota Vikings have plans to go from 11 and somehow get themselves close to the top 4, maybe top 3, I just don't believe you take one of those guys and have them sit. With McCarthy, Nix, Penix, Rattler, all these names we've talked about,
right.
I think it's easier to do that than be like, you know what? New England is willing to move too. They like our package, and we can go up and get, say, Drake May. Well, I think that guy starts immediately. Do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, that you're making... Yeah, if you're going to be sacrificing a ton of draft picks to make that move, then yes, that guy absolutely starts immediately.
I'm just not ruling it out.
If you sit there, yeah, right. And if you, again, I think if you sit at 11 and get the guy you want without sacrificing a bunch of trades or whatever, or you could trade back and still get the guy you want, whatever, then that absolutely can happen. But again, I think with Kirk, the Niners, they can make a run at him. How much can they pay him? How much can they afford to pay him? They've been winning with a very, very low payroll at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
All right,
which is
a team that just went to the Super Bowl, and you're going to roll in and bring in a new quarterback. I mean,
but he might be the one to get
might, yeah, right.
Because McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, Trent Williams, Fred, all those bits aren't going to be there forever.
Right, and maybe you can't do it at this minute because you don't know what the draft is and how many guys you have in there. But you have to draw a line in the sand and say, this is the line that we have with Kirk.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll pay you up to here. Anything above and beyond that, then you've got to go your way. Because if someone steps up and does that, then goodbye.
You enjoy yourself?
Loving it.
Combine show number 1. We're back at it tomorrow. And most importantly, thanks to everybody for listening, Nordo for producing, everybody here with the Vikings Entertainment Network, including Christian, Curly Harris, and Gabe Henderson. And I'm Paul Allen. Tomorrow, Minnesota Vikings General Manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski, and much more. From Indianapolis, that is Combine Coverage 2024, courtesy of 9 to noon on your home for Vikings football, KFAN.
Podcast today's Paul Allen Show, or listen back to previous show and interviews by going to the iHeartRadio app or KFAN.com.